Lachlan Brown is the writer and editor at hackspirit.com, and he says that there are 20 possible reasons why you are having trouble finding love. And he wants to tell you what to do about it. Let's go through this list and analyze on today's Dear Single Women's podcast. Hi, ladies. Welcome back to the podcast. The Dear Single Women's podcast is a podcast for single women who are healing, growing, living, and loving their lives on their terms. I am your host, Shanintra, and I'm so happy to be with you today. Please like, share, subscribe, follow, support the podcast, and thanks for tuning in. So, I found this article while I was listening to a YouTube video about one single woman's perspective and how she found love. And this article came up from Lachlan Brown, who I looked up, and he has a graduate degree in psychology, but it's not clear if he went forward to building his own practice, or it's not exactly clear, but he says that there are 20 possible reasons why you're having trouble finding love. And I thought this list was interesting. I wanted to share it with you guys and discuss some of the points with you. I wonder if any of these resonate with you. Some of them did resonate with me, and I'll tell you which ones. You can find the link to the article in the description on YouTube. It'll also be in the description on Spotify and Apple Podcast or anywhere else you are listening to this. Let's jump in. Let's see if some of these relate to your life. One possible reason you're having trouble finding love. Number 1, you're not really looking. He says, like it or not, finding love means going out and actually looking for it. So when I first heard that, I said, absolutely. I know that's probably the number one reason why I'm single. I am not doing enough to actively look and put myself out there to not be single. You can ask my friends. I don't like looking on the apps. I have lots of likes, lots of comments, and I literally will hand my phone over to my friends and ask them to filter for me and just get that number down to where I will be willing to even look at it. I have no desire. I think that is just the venue, the format. I think it's because it's social media. I don't know if that's the way I want to go about meeting somebody. So I don't know if it's that, but I just have no desire. But even in my everyday life, I'm not really getting out to get in places where I can mingle and meet with people. So I kind of relate to number 1. I don't know if I'm looking hard enough. Are you? Number 2, he says you're looking for the perfect person. That if you're trying to manifest the perfect man or woman with all the perfect qualities that you've been dreaming of since you were a kid, and that it's okay to have a type, but if your list is too long, too detailed, that could be why you're having trouble finding someone. I think there's truth to that, but at the end of the day, know thyself, right? If you like what you like, who are we to judge? Number 3 is actually not a reason. It just weirdly goes into pitching getting a relationship coach, which was odd. Number 4, you're in the wrong place. That's going back to what I said earlier. I think this one also fits me. He says, you live in a small town, the type of town where everyone knows everyone, and you simply can't understand why you can't find the man of your dreams. I think that is true. And if you live in a big city, he says, you're hanging around the wrong people. I know that this is definitely a reason why I'm still single. I am in the wrong place, period. I'm not going to meet anybody where I am in the suburbs where it's a lot of retirees and families, and that's just that. It's not going to happen. And you might get the occasional guy, but you know, that severely decreases your odds if you're around where there are one or two single men. Like, that's 50%. You need to you need to increase those odds. You need to give yourself more of a chance. Number 5, he says you believe too much in destiny. You've fallen for the Hollywood fairy tale. You think love will happen when the universe has destined for it to happen. I think that kind of, as a Christian, kind of makes me think of how, like, people say, just like let him find you and that kind of thing. Like, when it's meant to happen, it'll happen. And I don't really relate to this one, but I do think that that could hold you back if you're, as he says, using it as an excuse to avoid getting out of your comfort zone. Like, I guess just kind of waiting for it to come to you, and that kind of passivity, I guess I can see how that would hold you back from finding love. Number 6, he says you're still not over your ex. I am now, but he kind of pulled my card on that one, because I am now, but it's a new thing. Not that I didn't want to get over, but it's taken a long time, and I give myself that grace. What about you? He says, how can you find love when you're still in love with your ex? Even if you're not in love with them, you might feel resentful or frustrated. If not by them, then by the problems you two had. He kind of pulled my card on that one. That could definitely be one of the reasons, but I do now feel ready. So I do feel like I'm over my ex, if you want to call it that. So I don't think that's primarily a reason, but it was for a long time. I was not over it. I was just not over it. Number 7, he says you don't understand what they want. That you need to understand what men want from a relationship. He's really talking there about how men have this desire to protect and provide, and a lot of women are feeling very self-sufficient now and basically don't want that, aren't looking for that from a mate. And so if you don't understand that that's what men want, that could be one of the reasons why you're not having too much success with men. I don't relate to that at all. I am a feminine woman through and through. I want that. I would encourage that if I saw it in a man. Definitely. So, but that could be a reason. If you're used to being in your masculine bag a little too much because you take it all on your shoulders because, you have to. But if that's made you hard and not able to let that guard down and be soft and let a man do for you because you're so used to doing for yourself, that could be a reason. Masculine men don't want masculine women. They're not attracted to that. So maybe you don't understand what men want. Number 8, a big one. He says you have unresolved childhood issues. That is a big one. I definitely have that on my list as one of the ones that resonated with me, where I said, yeah, that's probably got something to do with it. But I've done a lot of work to get to the point now where I don't foresee that interfering. And I'm always going to be doing the work, so I'll always be healing and growing. And so I don't see that becoming an issue. And I just want to encourage anybody else who has unresolved childhood issues. It is going to be a lifelong journey and process, but that doesn't disqualify you from finding a really good mate. He calls it unresolved. I'm going to call it not willing to work through it. If you have childhood issues that you're not willing to confront and deal with and heal from, then yeah, you're going to be choosing mates and dealing with people out of trauma and emotional issues. But as long as you're working on it, you're good. If you're self-aware, if you're becoming more in tune with yourself and knowing where you are and where you need to go, you're good. When those issues of abandonment come up, That's just an example, but one that many people relate to and deal with. When the issues of abandonment come up, you're going to see that, recognize it, and keep working on those things and not project it onto a man. When those are really maybe unresolved childhood issues, you're going to work on it. So that should not disqualify anybody that's trying to heal from something that was done to them and something that they didn't deserve. So that doesn't disqualify you, but it could be an issue if you're not working on it. Number 9, you feel like you unconditionally deserve love. He says that the books and the fairy tales got you and made you think that someone's supposed to love you, flaws and all. And he just says that could be holding you back. Maybe it could be, but I think we all want unconditional love. I think we all want to feel security. We want to know that he's going to be there and not see something in us that's less than desirable and run away. We all want that security in a relationship. I think where it gets toxic, maybe we could call it toxic unconditional love, where you feel like you don't need to change, you don't need to work on anything, that he should just love you even though you're like a total crazy person or whatever. I don't think that is okay. So if that's what he means by you expect unconditional love, then yeah, that's not cool. But I think most people want to heal and work on their issues. He says number 10, ooh, you try way too hard. I'm going to read this part a little bit. He says, you want love more than anything else. We get it. You feel yourself getting older. You want to settle down and start building a life and family with someone, and your friends and family are constantly pressuring you to get into a relationship. So every time you go on a date, you already hear the wedding bells from the first minute. And even if you don't explicitly say how eager you are, people can smell desperation from a mile away. And there are few things less sexy than desperation. Interesting. Anything's possible, right? I'm sure maybe we've all been there at some point. I think you just got to fill up with yourself and know that at the end of the day, you're choosing the right person for you. The goal is not to just marry, but to marry well. And so I think as long as you keep that in mind, that you want to marry well, you're not going to be so thirsty and it won't come off as desperation that you're trying to get the first guy that swiped right on you to marry you. You're looking just as much as they're looking, right? So it's not just about them. You're going to take the time to make sure he is right for you. All right, I'm going to try to rush through the rest. He says, number 11, you're not being your true self. That you're trying to fake it till you make it. You're not really being authentic. You're trying to contort yourself to be what you think they want. That's hard to keep up. So I don't know how many people would do that for long term, but what do you think? Are you maybe not being your true self when you go out on dates and meet men? Number 12, you take dating partners for granted. He says that you are basically kind of cycling men through and through, that maybe you're expert at short-term relationships, but none of them ever wind up being the one. There are people out there who have no trouble getting started, but just seeing it through. And then there are those of us like me who maybe even have a hard time getting to that point. But, for the reasons I listed, maybe you're cycling through guys and, you need to slow down and look and see who's the right guy and don't just take them for granted. And honestly, I think the dating apps kind of help with that, because you already know, well, if I didn't work with this one, there's another one coming right behind them. And I know that that's why a lot of guys on there are looking for hookups. And I know that that's why a lot of ladies might go out with a lot of people, but like nothing materializes because we're just cycling through. Okay, who else is there? Who else is there? So I don't know if that's really our fault as much as I think the apps kind of conditioned us to that. But something to keep in mind. Number 13, you sabotage relationships. He says, ask yourself, how many exes do you actually have? Or if they're not exes, maybe flings, partners that you have for short term because you two ended it before things could get serious. So he says, like, you're sabotaging yourself and your relationships. And that's why you're having a hard time finding love, because when you know things start to get serious, you might pull back. He says maybe you're doing it because deep down you don't think you actually deserve love. And I know that's definitely a thing, that when it starts to feel too good, people pull back because it's not what you're used to. You're used to not getting good love from a man. You're used to dysfunction. You're used to, that's usually going back to childhood. You're used to a certain type of dysfunction in your life. And then when things are like normal, sometimes people get bored. Like it's a thing in psychology. People get bored in relationships because there's not that drama. And they say, oh, there's no spark. But really, you're just so accustomed to dysfunction that healthy things don't feel good to you. And so really, if that's you, just working on self-love, working on undoing that, changing your taste buds, so to speak, changing your appetite from dysfunction to healthy, normal love. Number 14, he says you don't know what you want because you don't know who you are. They have to take time to actually get to know yourself. Well, I always think that's a very good thing. I'm always going to advocate for that, whether or not you're in a relationship. That's why I always talk about healing. I believe I agree with that 100%. He says you're having trouble finding love, 15, because you're afraid of rejection. And if you're afraid of rejection, then you'll never put yourself out there, which means you're never going to find love. Definitely relate to that. I have that on my list. That has been a big problem for me. I'm working on that. I just bought a book actually from Amazon. It's about rejection, and I didn't even know, but it's actually a Christian author, and she talks about how Jesus was rejected and how Jesus dealt with that, and how we can also heal and deal with the rejection that we have gotten constantly in our lives. So I'm definitely ready to get into that. Maybe I'll put the title in the description as well. But if you're used to being rejected, you want to protect yourself, and so you'll stop trying. Could that be a reason why you're having trouble finding love? Number 16, he says you don't love yourself. That if you don't love yourself, how can you accept the love that's shown to you? I think a lot of people struggle with that. That kind of goes back to like childhood trauma, and just combating maybe your own negativity or negative messages that you receive about yourself. Number 17, you're closed off, that you're not emotionally open with others. If you don't emotionally open yourself to others, how can you expect to ever find love? That's what Lachlan Brown says. It is scary having to be emotionally open and available. And I know that is the only way you can connect with a person, but I feel like sometimes dating, navigating that whole thing is like playing chess. It's hard to navigate that, like being emotionally open and knowing exactly what to share. You don't want to overshare, and then they start to use stuff either to appear like the perfect guy or use it against you. When you get into an argument, you just don't know. It's tough. But I guess if you're letting that really hold you back, then he's saying that could be why you're having trouble finding love, because at the end of the day, people want to connect emotionally. People want to connect mentally with a person. And so if you're being guarded, overly guarded, you won't connect with anybody. That makes sense. Number 18, he says you don't know how to be sexy and play the game. Did I write that down? I did. I put that on my list. of the one that I think applies to me. He says this point most applies to people who have forgotten what it's like to date. The rust is real. The rust is real. It's been a long time. So I guess the only way to learn how to do it, right, is to keep practicing, keep doing it. He says, whether you like it or not, dating is a game. Do you play the game right? Or could that be why you're having trouble finding love? 19, he says, you just don't have time for it right now. Definitely agree with that. You have work, a social life, family, hobbies, a dozen other things you care about. You just have a lot going on. And so love requires time. And if you don't have time to give it, then that could be why you're having trouble finding love. I had to put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, and clear up some time so that I can be intentional about dating. And so maybe you need to do something like that. Maybe you gotta, have your priorities align with how you use your time. It is a real thing. And this one, last but not least, number 20, you already found it. He says you've spent all this time trying to find love, but the truth might be that you already found it a long time ago. Maybe you gave up on that relationship too soon. Maybe you let something stupid pull you apart, and it was really that old person. He says it won't kill you to try again and see what happens. I mean, things do end for a reason, so, before you take his advice on that, I'm just going to suggest, as the single woman guru, which I consider myself, I'm going to suggest you make sure that that's what it really was, something stupid and trivial, because the majority of the time, it didn't work out for a reason. That person could have just not been the right person for you, and you got to trust those instincts that you had at the time. So before you send that, hey, how are you text, just make sure that it was really something that you could overlook. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. The link to the article is in the description if you want to read it for yourself. Which one of these do you relate to? And what are you going to do to fix it? I'll see you on the next episode of the Dear Single Women's Podcast.